Well, welcome everyone to the second educational session of the ITRC Race to Resilience Initiative to organize transformational resilience coordinating networks in North America and worldwide. As we've done in the past, I want to give a thanks to our co-sponsors and our partners, the UN High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience Initiative, the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice, and Trauma-Informed Oregon are our core partners, and you can see all of the logos of the partners, co-sponsors. So I want to just start again by reminding everybody of the core message of this community practice and what we're trying to do in the entire Race to Resilience initiative, and that is that community is medicine. Throughout human history, our ability to band together and cooperate has always been key to surviving, adapting, and remaining healthy and resilient during different kinds of crises and solving those problems, those crises. And by organizing transformational resilience coordinating networks now in neighborhoods and communities, we can do this again now for the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis and many other adversities. Just a brief summary for those of you who weren't on last week's educational session of what we talked about. The key points are on top of the many other stressors people are experiencing all over the world today are those caused by the accelerating climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. And at different times, ways, and magnitudes, they're going to severely stress or acutely traumatize everyone over time. And this means we now have two really urgent tasks in front of us. Build the horizontal social infrastructure in communities that we call a Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network, and it has a steering committee or an advisory committee, whatever you want to call it, that uses a public health approach to engage residents in providing the mutual aid and emotional support needed to help people survive and remain healthy and resilient during this long, decades-long climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. But at the same time, we got to motivate residents to do their part to reduce the crisis to manageable levels, adapt to the impacts, and greatly enhance social, economic, ecological, and other conditions. And transformational resilience coordinating networks, the social infrastructure in your communities and your neighborhoods is really the most effective way to do this. So today we're going to focus on how an ITRC steering committee, after it's been formed, can begin to build community capacity to enhance wellness and resilience. And then we're going to zero in on the first foundational protective factor our research identified that's really going to be vital during the long climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, and that is to build social connections throughout the community. And a core element of that is mutual aid networks. They're almost one and the same in many ways, but I'll talk about the difference between them. And just to go update everybody again, who, especially those not on the call last week, the way we're organizing this community practice and the way we help organizations form transformational resilience coordinating networks is to start by organizing a steering committee, and that committee develops its own vision of what it wants to achieve, its mission, et cetera. But after that committee's come together for a while, that group, a wide and diverse group of people, the next step is to begin building community capacity in some way. And there's two overall ways to do this. There's lots of details that are different within each one. One is to offer trauma and resilience education to folks. Let's see, so there it is. And the second is to develop asset maps and community resilient portrait. We're going to talk about both of those today. Once those options or activities are completed in some form, then the Resilience Coordinating Network really goes and further embellishes, further maps out its vision of success, its goals, strategies, action plans. And one of the most important of those protective factors that strategy and action plan should focus on is building social connections across boundaries. So those are the two things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about these other core protective factors that you see listed there to the right in the next two sessions. Let's start with a short self-care resilience pause. And it's really important today with all the stresses people are experiencing, all the chaos that's occurring, especially in the US, but what the US chaos is doing for other, the impacts having on other nations. And I just want to take a sidebar and say, I apologize as an American for what we're doing. It's not what any of us, I think, wanted to see happen. So let's take a moment just to practice the skylight method. And this is a way to just notice what you are experiencing now in your body, your mind, and emotions without trying to change anything. There's no right or wrong, just noticing. And what the skylight method means, imagine you're sitting in a chair in a room that has a skylight in it. And you're just watching yourself through the skylight, looking down at you, observing what's going on. So take a moment and just to practice the skylight method. Imagine that you're looking at yourself objectively, and just notice what's happening in your body. Is there tension? Do you have a headache? Tension anywhere else in your body? Does it feel good? What's happening in your mind? Are you thinking about something else? Are you mind raking? Are you worrying about something or in the future? And what's happening within your emotions? Are you anxious? Are you sad? Are you feeling fine? Just notice just for a second. Take that, use the skylight method. Just notice what's going on. Skylight method's a very helpful way just to come back and be present. And then let's now practice resourcing. This is a Trauma Resource Institute skill. And so if you would, we're sort of following up on something we did last week, but bring to mind someone or something that helps you get through difficult times. Is it a person, a spouse, a loved one, a friend, or an imaginary person, or something? Getting exercise, whatever. How does it help you get to difficult times? And then fill in some details about why this happens. What is it about this person or this resource that calms you and enables your resilience? Let's think about that for a second. Maybe they say the right thing to you, or you always can just share, if it's a person, that you always can just share your emotions without feeling nervous about it, that you can trust what's going to happen. Just think about what that is. And I'm going through this fairly rapidly, so I would encourage you to do this on your own in much more depth. But now try to create a vivid image of your mind of this resource. Bring it to life now. So if it's a person, just sort of bring that person up and just see that person and see how they interact with you. Or if it's something you do, just sort of put yourself in that place again, doing that activity, being in that place, whatever it might be. And as you do that, take a moment to use the skylight method again and notice what's happening within you without judgment, without trying to change anything. What's going on in your body, mind, or emotions? Any change, anything different? Just notice that. So again, I've gone through this very rapidly, but this is a very good exercise. You can do it anytime, any place, and you can help others in your neighborhood and community and your friends and family do this exercise. It's very simple. It's just a way to become back down to the present moment. And we all need to remember our resilience resources because both chronic pressures and abrupt changes can be extreme stressors. Both of those kinds of activities. So let's do a transition stressor exercise. If you would, just please add up the number of transitions, meaning small or large changes, you and your close family members experienced, say, in the last 3 months or even in the last month. Did you have to change the way you did work or what you did for work or how you took your kids to school or where you shopped, whatever it might be. How many changes, small and large, did you have to make in the last 3 months? And again, we're going to go through this fairly rapidly, so I would encourage you to go spend more time with it after we're done. How many transitions? Just get a ballpark, things that are different. And as you think about this, think about, were some of those transitions stressful? And if so, how did you or your family cope with those stresses? What'd you do? Did you laugh a lot? Did you just hug each other? Did you not cope well? What went on? Now think about how many more transitions occurred in your community in the past 3 to 6 months. That is to say, if you made 5 major transitions or 2, and your community has 100,000 people, how many transitions occurring there all the time? And how did different residents likely cope with those stresses? Did you see that in the streets and in your friends and neighbors? And can you see what's happening, how those people coped? And now let's take it a step further and break down the transitions into different tasks. So select one of the transitions you identified and count the number of tasks you had to add to your responsibility or alter from previous times as a result. So you had to find a different place to purchase groceries. How many different tasks did you have to do? Well, I had to look on the internet to find out a new place. I had to find out their prices. I had to find out if they had the food I wanted. I had to drive to a different place, whatever it might be. How many transitions that you made, and then count the number of tasks that you had to add. And how did those additional or altered tasks affect you or your family? And how did you cope with that? So it's not just the bigger issues, it's the really tiny parts, changes you had to deal with. And now multiply your number of tasks by the number of transitions, and then imagine what your community has dealt with. Not only are they making these larger transitions, but they have to do all these smaller things to deal with these. And then think about the number of transitions and tasks that are required already and will increasingly be required as the climate ecosystem biodiversity accelerates, and the stresses that result and type of coping mechanisms that might be used. And the issue is, the point I'm trying to make here is that the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is the perfect storm. When cascading disruptions to the social, ecological, and economic systems people rely on for food, water, shelter, jobs, income, health, etc., are mixed with acute disasters and impact individuals, family groups, and organizations, the number of tasks and transitions required can create traumatic stresses that affect entire communities, entire societies, and lead to widespread maladaptive coping that is not healthy. And this is really why we need to rethink and redefine what we mean and what the causes are of mental health and psychosocial problems. What appears as mental health and psychosocial problems are usually coping mechanisms, self-protective survival mechanisms gone wrong. That is to say, they made sense. At one time, this was the best we thought we could do to cope with this issue. But if we continue to persist on those, they often go wrong. And when traumatic stresses are continuous or overwhelming, the mind often cannot distinguish between false and real threats. And we remain in the state of hyperinflated fears, flight, fright, freeze, or fawn reactions. And this can cause people to fail to consider healthy options and adopt coping mechanisms that end up harming themselves, harming other people, and even harming the natural environment. We're seeing that where I live. Because of the risk of wildfires, people are mowing down forests everywhere, which dries out the soils and reduces the capacity of nature to sequester carbon, and therefore increases the climate emergency and increases the risk of wildfires in the very place where they're living. So to address these stressors, what Transformational Resilience Coordinating Outwards should do is begin to build community capacity for wellness and transformational resilience. So here's one way to think about it. Here's the common traits of trauma-organized communities. And I'm going to start at the top. These are communities that are not really doing very well because there's so much stress and adversity that people have adopted maladaptive coping mechanisms. So up at the very top, there's constant fear about physical, psychological, or emotional safety. Going to the right, there's lack of clarity about what it means, what well-being means, and a lack of principles to guide decision-making. There's lack of good emotional management in many, many people. There's lack of agreed upon acceptable behaviors and practices. What is safe, what is healthy, what is good, what is not. There's lots of siloed groups and organizations doing their own thing that leads to conflict and poor social services, human services, rigid and often punitive rules and regulations that emerge, and constant groupthink that cause the inability to learn and correct mistakes. And by groupthink, what we mean is people are afraid of raising concerns, speaking out against what the group is as a whole is doing, becomes groupthink. There's failure to acknowledge or correct injustices or abuses of power and authority because of the groupthink and because of these other issues. And there's also the inability to grieve tragedy and losses that leads us to enact the very same patterns that cause these issues. All of this often adds up to create top-down authoritarian leadership and poor communications, et cetera. People lose their empathy and compassion for others, loss of trust and social supports exist. And all of this adds up to very little awareness or concern about environmental impacts. We see this in many communities today. Think about your community or your neighborhood. Do you see this? Which of these traits show up the most? I think, frankly, we're seeing them in the US big time now, many of them. But I think it's happening all over the world. So something to consider. And to transform these traits into a wellness and resilience enhancing community, TRCNs really need to begin building community capacity to prevent and heal those distresses and traumas. And you have to choose an approach that resonates with the residents and with the resources that are available in your community. So one example, you can engage residents in group events where they learn information and resilience skills that help them begin to heal their traumas by releasing the trauma stuck in their nervous system. Two great examples, but there are others, also many others. Trauma Resource Institute's community resilience model is being used in communities all over the world now. They work in many, many places. I encourage you to just ask them to come in and run a workshop or two, and often do it online, or they have people show up in person. But also the Center for Mind-Body Medicine runs community-minded public health, uses a public health approach to transform trauma. Again, a very effective program. They're working all over the world. We work closely with them. Elaine Miller-Karras, who's a co-founder of the Trauma Resource Institute, is a co-founder of the ITRC. So we work very closely with them also. And there's others that you can do, especially culturally appropriate methods. Another example of how to engage residents is to engage them in systems mapping to see how trauma is activated and transmitted in their community. The Rural Opportunities Institute does this work. It's really exciting work. They sit down with everybody and say, okay, so this person lashes out at this person. They map it. What does that person do? Oh, that person lashes out on this person. And they just map out how trauma, these maladaptive coping mechanisms have played out in the community. And the community does it. They get the feedback from it and they look at it, they start editing it, et cetera. But it's a really good process. I would encourage you to do it. And another way is just to organize a conference and start with a conference or workshops, whatever. A good example is the rural community of the Dalles, Oregon started this. They're in the Columbia River Gorge of Oregon. Dr. Sandy Bloom came over, and she did a bunch of workshops for him, or speakers, and it really launched some really great work out there. Another powerful approach is to engage residents in asset mapping. And assets are basically protective factors. It's too wordy, so they call them assets, that residents believe are used to prevent severe stresses and traumas, heal them when they do occur, and enhance wellness and resilience. And we talked about this last week some. Asset mapping actively engages residents in identifying and locating those protective factors in the community. And it does so through a strength-based wellness and resilience lens, not one focused on what's wrong with the community and all the deficits we have. One of the benefits of this asset mapping is that once the community's strengths and resources are identified and located on the map, residents can more easily see them and think about how to use them, and then also think about how to establish additional ones. Oh, there's no organization or entity over in this neighborhood that does this kind of work. How can we help organize an entity there, et cetera? And again, identifying and building on assets has far greater impact than the common approach we often use of assessing and trying to fix deficits or eliminate risks. So here's a sample community asset map. Over on the left side, there's institutions, there's individuals, there's associations. On the right side, there's physical spaces, gardens, et cetera. There's economic issues, and there's stories and connections people have. And the community just tries to identify all those. I've done many asset mapping processes, and I'm going to just suggest that 2 or 3 of these can be very helpful, but you start with one, because after they do one, the second one, it becomes much more detailed, and people really start to identify more. And by the third, they go, oh yeah, here's some others I hadn't thought about, and this one really isn't that helpful, so it just brings it further. And you then actually even can locate those assets on maps of your communities. So this institution, this organization's over here on this block, and you can see, oh, there's nothing over in the upper left-hand corner. Oh, we got to think about that. It really helps people see that. And then you can possibly develop a community resilience portrait with that. One outcome is to develop a written portrait. Here's what we think is the protective factors in the community. Here's the protective factors we need to still work on. But a written document is an essential. It's really what's more important is to use the process to build social connections and help people understand these concepts and use these. And again, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this. You can start with a group of 6, 8 people. You can start with a big meeting of 100 people, whatever. Just focus on what works given your demographics, your culture, your resource. The ABCD Institute at DePaul University has great resources on how to do asset mapping. And you use these processes, these trauma healing events, the asset mapping, whatever, to actually, the TRCNs then actually use that to further develop and refine their vision of success. What do we mean by success here in our community, and how will it be different than what's already happening or has done in the past? Then what are our specific goals? What are the strategies we're going to use? And we use the term multi-systemic, meaning it's not one strategy. There's a whole bunch of things that you're going to be doing, the different populations to reach out to different populations, and then the action plans that implement those strategies. And a public health strategy, and we talked about this a little last week, focuses on population level prevention. So first it's population level. The primary focus is prevention. And this requires using what we call proportionate universalism. And this means everyone you can think about it as a pyramid. Everyone gets assistance in many ways, learns skills, resources, et cetera, to help them prevent issues and heal them when they occur. So as an example, you teach all adults how to perceive when they're reacting with a fight, flight, freeze reaction to a threat, and then teach them presencing and purposing skills. There's many other universal things that everyone gets, but at the same time, you're also reaching out and using targeted prevention focuses, which focuses on people who have characteristics that place them at greater risk, giving special attention and using different kinds of methods to reach out to people who are living in higher risk areas or who are typically marginalized, whatever. And then there's also, that's connected with intensive prevention activities that help people who are already experiencing problems control or reduce their symptoms. So helping people who are struggling with drug or alcohol abuse learn how to prevent relapse. These are all connected. It's not just, we do all of these, but where they're usually disconnected. And we might just focus on those who are experiencing substance abuse and not thinking about the universal. Put it all together. And at the same time, you want to integrate that with a life course approach. And what this means is you use different methods with different age groups. I think we all know this, but it's important. And it's important because people are typically exposed to different kinds of stressors at different ages and stages of their life. So different protective factors need to be used for children, adolescents, working adults, and older adults. And those strategies really need to focus on these 5 core foundational protective factors that are really needed to be a population level mental wellness and transformational resilience for the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis. We briefly went through them last week. We're going to start today and just focus on the first one, and the last 4 we'll focus on the next 2 sessions. And the first one, and far and away the most important, is to build social connections across boundaries. So just take a moment and think about, how much does your happiness, fulfillment, and meaning in life depend on your connection with other people? Your friends, your families, your neighbor, your spouse. How much of your happiness, fulfillment, and meaning depends on that? And I think once you think about that, you realize that social connections are by far the most important protective factor in all aspects of life, and especially during times of stress and trauma. And the reality is that loneliness and social isolation today are profound drivers of many types of problems. A growing research shows that loneliness and social isolation are worldwide. The internet and social media and all that is driving that, but many other factors also. And they're producing anxiety, depression, suicide, so increased suicidality, increased aggression, increased violence, and more. And lack of social connections and loneliness can lead to loss of self-worth, loss of meaning and purpose in life, which are essential human needs. Loneliness actually also inhibits the immune system. It promotes inflammation. It aggravates the stress response, and making it twice as harmful to both mental and physical health as issues like obesity and other physical health issues. And it also greatly increases premature mortality. Conversely, good social connections helps prevent mental health problems, strengthens our physical health, and increases our chance of longevity by, research shows, about 50%. People who are connected to others have lower rates of anxiety and depression. Think about yourself when you're connected with your friends and family, neighbors, whatever. Do you feel as anxious or depressed? Don't they help you? They also have higher self-esteem and more empathy with others. And people with good social connections tend to be more trusting and cooperative, which makes others more open to trusting and cooperating with them. In other words, social connections generates positive feedback that enhances social, psychological, emotional, and physical wellness and resilience. And they are vital during periods of toxic stresses, emergencies, and disasters. And many of you who have experienced a disaster already or see this happening around the world, we know that in the first 5 days, 3 to 5 days, and often much, much longer of disasters, survival mostly depends on your family, friends, and neighbors, not emergency responders. They often can't get there or they don't exist. Social connections are really the friends, families, and neighbors are the people who help you move to safe places or obtain food, water, shelter, and other basic needs in disasters. And they are key to providing a vital sense of safety and emotional support. during and after extreme disasters. Just one example, back in 2021, here in the Northwest, the west side of the Northwest, we had a couple of days in a row of 113-degree temperatures. We've never seen anything like that yet. The research found that socially isolated people were much more apt to die during that. Nobody knew them. Nobody knew how to go help them. They didn't know who to call to get help going to a cooler place, et cetera. And these same dynamics apply to many, many other disasters. I'm sure they applied to what's going on just went on in Los Angeles with the wildfires and everywhere. And this is why, again, building social connections is by far the most important protective factors we really need to focus on for the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis and many others. And all the activities of your resilience group should focus on building social connections. It should be a standalone focus, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it also should be woven into all the other 4 foundational protective factors that we'll talk about in the next 2 weeks. So here's just one way to think about that. There's 3 different kinds of social connections you want to build. There's lots of different ways to think about this, but one is to build bonding social support networks, close relationships between family, friends, and neighbors. These are often called strong ties because you're sharing your life with those people and what's going on. But then it's also important, just as important, to build bridging social support networks. And these are connections between different bonding social support networks. These are called weak ties because you don't share all the details of going on in your own life with the group, 3 blocks away, but you're very connected with them and they can help you out. And the third is linking social support networks, and that is linking the bridging and bonding networks to organizations or individuals that have resources in the community, political power, economic power, so they can help during disasters. They're also called weak ties. Weak and strong ties are equally important. It's really important. Just focusing on bonding is not enough, although it's vital. So here's just a few examples of how social connections can be built. The city of Edmonton, Canada, now called their Neighborhood Services Program, it used to be called Abundant Community Edmonton. This is up in northern Canada, has a program where they actually recruit residents and then train them in how to go around and knock on every door in their block or 3 or 4 blocks and interview people, everybody, about what they're interested in, what their concerns are, et cetera. They put all that information into a database and share it all over the community. So people who find out they like to walk their dogs at 6 a.m. in the morning find out that 3 blocks away there's somebody else doing that, and they start doing that together. People who like doing woodwork together start doing that kind of work together. It's been a very, very helpful, positive program. And I think I can't remember the last data I saw, 3/4 or more of the community, of the neighborhoods in Edmonton do this kind of work. The San Francisco Neighborhood Empowerment Network, which is actually now sort of on hold a little bit due to funding issues, they also have a very way. This is a huge metropolitan area, and they actually close down streets in big metropolitan areas and hold potlucks in the middle of the street and invite all the people out of their high rises to share food, get to know each other. From that, they organize a resilience network that develops a resilience plan for the neighborhood. Very powerful. And there's many other ways to organize these social connections, organize some kind of events, reach out to people and let them know about it, but also try to provide food and transportation to make it easier for people to attend and really focus on building trust and camaraderie. The Foundation for Social Connections has many other great examples of this kind of work, so something to look at. And mutual aid networks are a very powerful way to build social connections. And they're really the same as a transformational resilience coordinating network, but they are usually short-term. We're set up just for disasters or they get activated during disasters. We need to organize these on an ongoing basis. They are groups of residents that voluntarily work together to provide assistance, key resources, emotional support to others in times of crisis. And also they provide services when no formal disaster management and other services exist, or they're incapable of assisting. Mutual aid networks can focus on many different needs, including disaster resilience, shelter, food, distribution, financial assistance, childcare, emergency healthcare, just all sorts of different kinds of things. And they are not charity. This is really important to understand. The charity usually involves a hierarchical relationship between a giver and a receiver. It's also often an NGO, maybe it's a religious organization or other who get resources and give them to people sort of one way. That's not what this is. Mutual aid networks promote solidarity through the horizontal exchange of resources and support in the communities. And that's really powerful. And TRCN should really try to organize these mutual aid networks throughout their neighborhood and community. Just a few examples. My wife's grew up in right outside of Asheville, North Carolina, and her two sisters still live there and their families. They were all hit very hard by Hurricane Helene. And mutual aid networks got active there, and my wife's two sisters joined, and her family joined to provide resources to people everywhere. Luckily, my wife's two sisters their home was not damaged. And so you see a couple of resources. There's Beloved Asheville and Triangle Mutual Aid there. The Los Angeles Mutual Aid Los Angeles Network is another really good one. The Mutual Aid Hub has very helpful resources, as does Dean Spade's book, which I read a couple of years back. It was really organized around the COVID, but it's very, very helpful. Physical resilience hubs can be helpful sometimes for some people, but I want to offer some caution there. So physical hubs, you set up one. I know California has a number of them. They've done a few in Oregon now. They can be helpful when people trust them and they're easily accessible by residents. Hubs can provide information, key resources, support, and they can be located in a library, a community center, a business, religious facilities, or you've got a neighborhood transformation resilience coordinating network. You just identify a couple of homes that are the hubs for the neighborhoods. And I've even seen one a group that organized it in park benches. And what I mean by that is, I think it's Victoria, BC in Canada. They identified a park bench in a park nearby a neighborhood. And underneath it, they have a metal box locked up that has the names of everyone in the community with their addresses and issues that they might have. Also a solar panel so people can recharge their phones, etc. And when there's a disaster of some kind, people can go there to that bench. They share what's going on. They see everybody. They find out, oh, Sally's over 2 blocks over. She's in a wheelchair. She can't get out. Here's her address. Let's go help her. And that kind of help really can emerge from that approach. Disaster hubs, during disasters, a hub can be a central gathering point for people to find safety, obtain resources, assess what's going on, plan a response. But they're not for everyone. This is a quote from Kristen Baha, who used to run the hub program from USDN. They're most generally helpful with people who don't have other options or resources to go to. Generally, people only living nearby or who have the ability to easily get to the physical hub will do that. And that they trust the people who are in charge and the other people who are likely going to be there. And if they don't trust those people, they don't live nearby, et cetera, they won't go or they can't go. And it's often seen also a physical facility itself might be damaged or become inaccessible in a disaster. Where I live in Western Oregon, last year we had an ice storm that lasted a week where there was about 2 to 3 inches of ice on the ground. Power was out for a week. Nobody could go anywhere. Nobody was going to make it to a resilience hub, a physical hub, if it existed. But the social connections are really the key. This again underscores that the key to wellness and resilience is the horizontal social infrastructure in communities that TRCNs should focus on. That's what we did during the ice storm. We were still able to text, and people all throughout our neighborhood were texting, helping. Some people walked over on the ice to give food to somebody, et cetera. That's really the key. So I want to stop now. Jesse, we're going to do some breakout rooms. And I want you all, we'll take an 8-minute breakout room to share what you have taken away so far from today's session. And discuss how you might be able to implement similar approaches in your neighborhood and community. And we'll be a little longer than last week's breakout session, not much. We'll do it for 8 weeks. But then if you have key issues that emerge or key questions, post them in chat, and Christian will read them to everyone. And we'll have a few minutes for question and answer before I conclude. So I'm going to turn it over to Jesse, and please stay with us now in the Resilient Hubs. It will really be in the breakout rooms, hubs too, but breakout rooms, so you can get a chance to talk with some other folks. Jesse?
Appreciate that, Bob. Opening up the rooms now. Look forward to seeing everybody back here soon.
Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to have some good conversations and to meet other people and hear what they're doing a little bit. If you have any key issues that emerged or key points that people thought were important or questions, please post them in chat briefly, and we will, Christian will start to read some of those. So was this a helpful presentation, this information helpful to you? Did you learn something that you didn't know before? Is there some way you think you can begin to implement similar approaches in your neighborhood or your community? Or any questions about how you would do that? It might have come up. Just go ahead and post that. Anything you see there, Christian, yet?
Well, we have some fantastic gratitude being shared. Blown away they are by the amazing work going on in their group and what folks were sharing there. And a lot of gratitude for every person on this call doing the work. So thank you for that. It's nice to express that to the group here, especially seeing folks come in from all over. Excellent. Right. Feel free to post your questions or key takeaways in chat, folks. There was discussion about the importance of maintaining communications and keeping folks as close to home as possible after a disaster. So really leveraging those communication networks. Love to see that.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a question. Can we speak more about the way mutual aid works within the Community Resilience Network?
Yeah, good question. There are many ways one and the same. But mutual aid networks have normally been formed just in, first of all, in communities that don't have many resources, or not many emergency responders, et cetera, or the emergency responders simply can't get there. And it's just one of the core elements that a TRCN needs to focus on, and that is not only help build the social connections, but help people come together and say, how can we help each other during a disaster if no one else is there to help? So how can we help people find food, or how can we help people find a way out of a mess if their homes or their infrastructure is damaged so they can't move to a safe place, and have those discussions ahead of time. And then you might, again, we talked last week about you might have different resilience teams working with youth, different with the public sector, private sector, whatever. And then ask them, how can you do that work? How can you engage the people involved with developing and implementing those strategies, do that kind of work to reach out to the people you work with, to youth, to educational programs, et cetera, and engage them in planning for and getting these mutual aid networks up and running. And this is something we can talk more about at this coming Thursday's skills training open session, if we want to do that. Well, there might be another one, but I'm going to go on. We only have a few minutes left. And Christian, if something else comes up that's a good question, let me know. One of the questions that always comes up is, can we build social connections in today's really polarized condition? And yes, we can. I think when you think about it in your own, unless you have isolated yourself from everybody else, you probably are already doing this kind of work, but you might not think about it in this way. It's not easy, but instead just talk with people about practical issues they are concerned about and how we can start to address them that benefit everybody. Because those positive connections and helping can really help create positive change. Many people who are very polarized today feel a lack of self-worth because they have been isolated or marginalized. And so the more you can connect with them, the more they will feel that, oh, I do have worth. People feel that. It's a way to engage with me. But do so in a non-judgmental and non-confrontational way. It's not about calling them, oh, you're bad, you're thinking about this, etc. And create a welcoming environment. Practice your own self-regulation. Right? Use the skylight methods. There's a lot more. We'll do a couple more the next couple of weeks. So you can calm your body, mind, and emotions, and co-regulations. When you calm your body, mind, and emotions with people who are ramped up, it often helps them calm. That's co-regulation. Just by you being calm, they will calm. Doesn't always work, but it often happens. And just provide everybody with a strong sense of safety and support, and see if you can engage people in engaging. This is what TRCNs need to do. Their real needs that they're dealing with. And one way to think about this is mattering is key. Interact with and care for people as if they matter, and they're much more likely to want to then engage with you also and go beyond sort of ideological positions. And it's also, I've talked about this before, but it's really important to build social connections among youth, BIPOC residents, and other vulnerable groups, but don't isolate or fragment them. What I mean by that is you see this throughout history. We see this big time now in the US, but in many other countries also. When people are defined, when a population is defined as vulnerable or at risk, or in some other ways different, they are others, people discount them, discount their importance, or show little concern for their plight. And so when you focus on any group separately from others, it can easily revert back to the fragmented and siloed approaches that dominates society today. And it can increase segregation and social isolation rather than reducing that for people who are already experiencing that kind of otherness, being othered, and pit people against each other for attention and funding, et cetera. Sort of join them together, do it all together. And just as importantly, is building social connections is really key for enhancing collective efficacy that is going to be needed as the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis worsens. When people come together to work on shared interest, it's clear, and you just think about your own experiences, they become more effective, which increases the likelihood of achieving their goals. So just one example, the research shows in communities where neighborhoods believe they can prevent crime and violence, research shows that they came together and actually could do it. And strong collective efficacy also brings residents together to prevent physical, psychological, social, economic, and ecological problems and other forms of inequality and injustices. Just bring those people together and say, how do we help everyone? And it's really going to be vital that collective efficacy is going to be vital to engage people in activities that reduce the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis to manageable levels, continue to innovate and adapt to the impacts, and then regenerate local conditions. So just a brief summary. After the Transformational Resilience Core Networks is formed, you should try to begin to build community capacity to transform the community from a trauma organized. And I encourage you to think about, is your neighborhood or community trauma organized? Go back through and look at those traits, which exist there, to transform to a wellness and resilience enhancing community, and then use the information that emerges through that to refine the vision, goals, strategy of the TRCN. But those strategies, we'll find that building social connections is the most important protective factor that it should focus on, because it's essential, those social connections, to deal with stresses and adversities and disasters. You can use a variety of methods to build those social connections. It should be a standalone focus, specifically designed your strategies to build social connections, but it should also be part of all the other protective factors the TRCN focuses on, including building and forming those mutual aid networks. And when you do build those social connections, don't isolate people or use siloed approaches that segment them even more from others. Instead, use a combination of proportionate universalism and life course approaches. So this Thursday, we're going to meet again for the skills training open session. We don't have a long presentation like I'm going to make today. We'll focus in on specific skills. Yeah, we've already got a lot of people giving feedback, and I guess there's 3 or 4 skills that have popped to the top that we want to focus on. But if you can, and you'll see this in the Zoom, in the chat, please take a moment to complete the short questionnaire that gives us more information about what people want to focus on. And then remember, next Tuesday's April 15th educational session will be more like today. We're going to focus on the 2 additional core protective factors. How do you engage residents in enhancing local condition and help everyone become trauma and resilience informed? And finally, if you want to apply to form a TRCN in your community, there's the website you can go to do that. So I'll just close by saying again that just try to always remember the key message we're trying to share. Community is medicine. Throughout human history, our ability to band together and cooperate has always been key to surviving, adapting, remaining healthy and resilient during crisis, and solving complex problems. The individualism that's so present, extreme individualism in the US and other Western nations, sort of counters this. But this is going to be, building this community is key to addressing, to remaining healthy and resilient, and addressing the complex problems related to the climate emergency and many others. And by organizing these TRCNs in communities now, we can do it now. So with that, I want to leave you all and thank you all for joining us. Hope we'll see a lot of you on Thursday, and wish you a good week until that time. Thank you all again, and the best to all of you. Take care, everyone.